Well, I think to begin with, it's fantastic to see there was such a great turnout this year, and standing room only in the all of the sessions that we had. I think the other thing, I mean, the theme this year was about sort of Africa integration, Africa trade. This is a session that brings together Africans from all over Africa, and I think there is a sense of kind of a new Pan-Africanism, and obviously the Continental Free Trade Agreement is part of that. So I think it's very exciting to see young Africans, in a sense, bonding together, because at the end of the day, the challenges in Africa are only going to be solved by young Africans working together, and I think what Saïd is doing and this session is doing is showing that that's coming true. Well, I think one of the starting points is we have to be realistic in Africa about the public sector and its capabilities. And I don't think we should be asking the public sector to do more than a few things that it can do at a time and develop. I thought one of the most interesting sessions was Ike's session about public-private sort of partnership, and he's committed a lot to building up the capacity of the public sector. So there has to be some effort, and I know others working on it, to build up a kind of moral compass for the public sector. But that said, most of what has to happen in Africa is the private sector, and people need to be prepared to, both people in the countries, but people outside of Africa, invest in Africa, help build some big businesses, bring technology. We had the session that I was on that talked a lot about leapfrogging. Obviously, leapfrogging is not everywhere, but the places where it's going to happen, we need to push and accelerate that. So I think, again, the young people in Africa are so smart, so driven, so entrepreneurial, so tech savvy, that working together, they can solve these issues. It is fascinating because at the time you've got these fractures in the EU and we have challenges about Brexit. We look at Africa, we've always felt it's divided into 54 countries, but under Paul Kagame's leadership from Rwanda and the Africa Union and Afro-Exim Bank, you can really see some momentum on sort of coming together. And they recognize people are different and barriers, et cetera, but there's the will there, and I think people can actually learn from that. I think the other part that I think Europeans are starting to understand is the scale of Africa means the issues are not just for Africa, they're for Europe. And we don't want to have a situation where Africans remain poor. We don't want a situation where we have more failed states in Africa, because it creates security issues for Europe, migration issues for Europe. But just to put this in context, just within Nigeria today, there were more babies born than all of Europe. So these demographic realities are not something in the future, they're happening today. And Europe needs a strategy for Africa. And I know that about 2 years ago, Angela Merkel announced Germany's what was called the Marshall Plan for Africa. We haven't heard a lot more about that, but I just think there needs to be some thinking at the European level. How do you engage, support Africa, but also benefit, because they're going to have bigger consumer market, they're going to have younger people, there will be migration, but you want the migration to be of educated people that are going to support Europeans in an aging society. So all of those issues need to be thought through on the European side. Well, if you actually look at the world demographics, as far as my understanding of the number of children outside of sub-Saharan Africa is now stable, or even declining. The number of working age people outside of sub-Saharan Africa is stable. The reason the population continues to increase is because we're living longer outside of sub-Saharan Africa. But the only place where the number of children and the number of working age adults is increasing is in Africa right now. So, and that has implications for markets, for where there's opportunities, because if you go to China right now, you might have seen recently there's been a big downturn in auto sales. Well, you have the one-child policy, the population is now shrinking, the working age population is shrinking. Can you expect increased demand for something like automobiles or other consumer goods? So if a company wants to grow, despite the challenges, it's going to have to figure out how to grow in Africa. Well, I just think kudos to Saïd Business School and the Student Africa group that put this all together. I mean, what a fantastic event it was an incredible moment for me to be back in the Balliol Hall and that event yesterday. A wonderful speech from Madame Ota, who was at the World Bank and now at Oxford. So it's just an amazing event, and to bring together this collection of people shows the commitment to Africa, but also shows the drawing power that Oxford has as one of the world's world's great institutions. So Oxford needs to, and the Saïd School needs to continue to use that drawing power to make a difference to Africa and its challenges.